The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is without a doubt one of the most beautiful games of all time. But what makes this game so beautiful? For me, it's the grass. Grass in video games is really important for creating a really immersive atmosphere. Think of your favorite games. How would they look without the grass? Really weird, right? When making a game, foliage is one of the most important details, and for me, I always look straight at the grass.
Yo, I've never seen foliage in a game with decent textures.
Something about seeing millions of flowing strands of grass in Breath of the Wild just mesmerizes me and leaves me wondering, how could Breath of the Wild possibly render all this grass at once? That's not really the topic of today's video, but I will give you the short answer. Culling and LODs. Culling basically makes the game only render what's in your view. Everything else outside of the player's view is simply not there. So, objects outside of your vision and objects behind other objects. And then there's LODs, which stands for level of detail. It simply gives objects a lower mesh the further they are away from the player. Some of them just go to a lower polygon count, and some of them straight up turn into a flat texture. Alright, now that we all know how it works and why I find it so fascinating, I wanted to take the time to share my favorite spots in Breath of the Wild to just enjoy the beauty of the game. And most importantly, it's grass. Exploring Hyrule is such a unique experience in Breath of the Wild. Whenever I take the time to just relax and have a breather, there's a few spots I always find myself drifting towards. The first spot I always find myself visiting is one that I can imagine everyone watching this video also finds himself at quite often. And of course, I'm talking about the opening sequence to Breath of the Wild. The importance of this spot goes without the need of explanation. It is probably the most nostalgic spot on Hyrule for every Breath of the Wild fan, and the grass here is definitely no exception to that nostalgia. You can almost remember exactly how you felt that moment you ran out onto that hill and thought to yourself, wow, this game is beautiful. But for me, the grass is what caught my eye. Millions of blades of grass flowing in that perfect shade of green. I was awestrucken. So for me, this spot is definitely my number one spot in Hyrule, with this strand of grass being my favorite in particular, simply because this is exactly where I was standing when I first played Breath of the Wild multiplayer with Point Crow. For me, this strand of grass easily gets an S tier. Alright, and before we get on to the next part, did you know that... Just kidding, we don't do that over here. Yet. The next stop I absolutely love to visit when I'm feeling the Breath of the Wild vibes is the Korok Forest. You were thinking it, I was thinking it, the Wii U died just thinking about it. The Korok Forest is one of the most stunning locations in the game, from the sunlight streaming in from above to the Great Deku Tree towering above overlooking the whole Korok Forest. Let's not forget about the beautiful pedestal for the Master Sword. This spot is a shining example of the profound beauty that is the world of Hylia. And of course, you can't forget the millions of strands of beautiful flowing grass shining in the light streams that are scattered around the Korok Forest. I often find myself just walking through the Korok Forest, taking in the scenery and enjoying the serene environment. But it's not always what you see that matters most, as our next strand of grass to rank on the tier list is this peculiar little strand of grass sitting right under the Master Sword pedestal. I chose this strand of grass because it reminds me of one of the most impactful experiences in Breath of the Wild when I first pulled the Master Sword. So this particular blade of grass, for me, is going in the B tier. I'm giving it a B tier because it's associated with such good memories, but I won't give it an A or S because you can't really see it without using a FreeCam mod. Our next spot of discussion brings us all the way over to the other side of the map, at the Korok Bazaar, a beautiful oasis in the middle of a dry, barren desert. This place holds such a stark contrast to the rest of its surrounding environment that I can't help but to be enamored by the stunning beauty of the location. And what makes this spot all the more cool for me is the fact that there is indeed grass. I love the fact that even in such a harsh and barren environment, you can still find grass standing strong, proving once again that grass is the #1 piece of foliage in video game history. Picking a favorite blade of grass in the Korok Bazaar was very difficult for me. But ultimately, I chose this one, as it is one of the only green blades of grass in the entire desert. For me, this strand easily gets an A tier. Now, with just 2 more spots left to visit, I wanted to bring you to honestly one of the most memorable places in the game for me. Climbing Satori Mountain and finding just a single cherry blossom tree was honestly one of the most ethereal parts of the game for me. That shimmering pond in front of the cherry blossom tree, the long grass-filled path leading up to the tree, the gorgeous view of Hyrule from way up in the mountains. Such a beautiful spot in general. I just love to spend my time chilling here and soaking in the view. And for me, this wonderful blade of grass right here is my favorite in this location, as it's exactly where I like to stand when I'm staring at the beautiful tree in Satori. This strand of grass gets an easy A tier. And the final spot that I'll be sharing today is this great big tree with an amazing view of Hyrule Castle, surrounded by a ton of pretty flowers and flowing grass, next to a decently sized pond. I love sitting here and staring out at the castle, reminiscing about all the fun times I had in this game, whether it be speedrunning or just regular playthroughs, alone or with my friends in the multiplayer mod. This spot is one of the most serene and beautiful spots in all of Hyrule. And our next piece of grass is just right over here. To be honest, I'm not quite sure why I chose this piece of grass, but it is going to get an easy S tier. Don't ask me in the comments why. And that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you guys for looking at all of my favorite spots with me and ranking all this grass with me. Let me know if you enjoyed and hit some funny buttons down below to help me grow. And also thanks for the love for my recent videos. Alright, see ya.